God reiterated what would happen, that through the seed of the woman, that mankind would be saved. Because Jesus was the seed of the woman. Now, obviously, that also came through Adam as a line, because Seth, well, Abel and then Seth came through Adam. Cain didn't came through Adam. Cain was a result of the serpent implantation of DNA. So the twins, which is bifundification, twins from different fathers, which is a scientific possible fact because it's happened. Those twins obviously came from a different source. Now, ultimately, Jesus, I don't really believe, had Eve or Adam's DNA. I think he had an implanted egg put into Eve, but obviously the symbol of it was, there. Now, therefore, what Adam did was to choose that Eve wouldn't die alone, or die in that state. And I think inherently he knew something of the Father's heart. So then when God meets them and talks to them and tells them of what will happen, he talks about Eve, Jesus coming to crush the Satan's head and all of that stuff. So he's prophesying of Jesus actually coming in the way he did. So I think that's what Adam was doing. No, Adam, he didn't redeem Eve from the point of saved her in any way like Jesus could do it, but without the seed of the woman, then there would have been no ongoing line. Now, she could have, there were children that existed at that point, so it could have been, but I think his choice was, I know that this is a deception, but I am not leaving my wife. That's and I have had conversation around it, although trying to get a straight answer out of one of the cloud of witnesses sometimes is not always easy, because it's almost like they don't have permission to tell you everything. So Adam did talk to me about his children and all the thousands of children they had before they entered that state, and those who then chose to go back through the path to the tree of life, and those who didn't, and some chose God as father and some chose Adam as father. Those were the ones that Cain was able to go and find, who had cities out there, because there were a lot of them and they'd already expanded. So they weren't not fruitful. They weren't, disobedient, if you like, from the beginning, because time didn't exist in the same framework. Time fell. Well, it's a difficult concept, but time was not the same before as after. And so there was a lot of people who were children of Adam and Eve. And there was no fallen sense, so they were able to reproduce without there being this genetic issue over brothers and sisters. That's a concept which came through law. And there seems to be times through history where different things seem to apply. Abraham wasn't ever told off for having different wives. God didn't seem to have a problem with, Jacob having two sisters as wives. I think Jacob had a problem with it. I think, because he was, deceived into it by Laban, tricked into it. But that actually may have been what he reaped from if he sowed what he reaped, reap what he sowed, because he deceived into receiving having him lay hands on him and bless him, so there was a bit of a bit of karma there, I guess. He got back a little bit in being deceived, but there are certain things that didn't seem to be an issue, and then there are things which we have applied. So it's interesting. I was asking this question the other day of what is marriage? Is it the piece of paper and the legal thing that we have, or is it something from God's perspective very different? No, I'm not against marriage. I'm not against a legal piece of paper, but actually we know a legal piece of paper doesn't stop people doing things contradictory to what they vowed in marriage, does it? So in a sense, what is marriage from God's perspective, and how does he view it? And, the New Testament doesn't say an awful lot other than, the marriage bed should be faithful. And I think that's absolutely correct. But really doesn't go into whatever ceremony or words or anything else. Obviously, there was an old covenant perspective to marriage, and they did have a process, went through the sort of betrothal process to the consummation process and all of that. But they also had a concept of girls could be married at 13 or something and basically sold off, almost traded for a position or territory or a favor. And it was like, I certainly wouldn't think that. We'd call it human trafficking and child abuse today. And that was acceptable in those days. And I don't think that would be something I would want to see as an acceptable state of what marriage is. So you've got to take it out of the context and put it into today's context. And I think find out, well, what is God's view today about lots of things we may have assumptions about, because we may be programmed by culture or by some religious programming into seeing things a way which maybe God doesn't view, and maybe having a fresh understanding of how God wants us to relate to what he's doing today, rather than try and apply 2,000 or 4,000 year old principles when he wants us. No, it's never going to be opposite to love. And I think that's always the measure of whether anything is true or carries truth. Is it aligned to love? And if you measure it against love, I don't think you can go too far wrong, because God is always going to look at the heart and love first before any external issues. But it does throw up a lot of questions which I think we should be potentially asking. How do we live, and how do we establish the kingdom on earth as it is in heaven today? What is the way you want us to do that? And I think certainly not the way most of the religious stuff is done, from my perspective anyway. Hi everyone, we're starting a Patreon page, patreon.com/freedomarc, and we would like to invite you to partner with us in taking the message of God's unconditional love, limitless grace, triumphant mercy to a bigger global audience.